Shalom, my bitches. My end is here at NFY bringing you When Deathworlders Visit, Part 2 by Andrew's Second Account. With nothing much to do, Aranis had retrieved her tablet and began playing her fantasy game while mumbling about inaccuracies, and Stephen started flipping through their visa application hard copy. The document was a simple packet of large, thin sheets of plastic, roughly 3 times the size of a typical leaf of notebook paper. It had been printed by the GC customs officials in English, and the duo had been supplied with a pair of what were essentially fat, cheap Sharpie markers. Stephen began searching over the sheets, looking for something, but what? He could not say. Something about the questions felt wrong, or odd. No, something was missing. He flipped through the sheets one more time to be sure. There wasn't a single question asking about citizenship. There were questions about systems, planets, even orbital stations, but nothing about who had issued his digital passport. His eyes settled on the information about race, where he had listed himself and Aranis as human. A complete lie, to be sure, but they could pass it off to the casual observer as an odd sexual dichotomy that wasn't even at the extreme end of the spectrum. Almost identical environmental conditions, light spectrum aside, on Nyx and Earth had resulted in striking instances of convergent evolution, similar pressures developing similar solutions, even in terms of social psychology. Compared to the variety of aliens in the galactic community, they might as well have been brother and sister. For birth location, they had both checked planet and wrote in Earth, the same answer they supplied for their permanent residence location. Again, no reference to citizenship whatsoever. Just to be safe, Stephen located the blank lines in the comments section in the backs of their packets and wrote in citizenship. So sent Confederation. He felt a little better knowing he hadn't completely lied on their visa applications. Regardless, he wasn't about to tell anyone his wife was born and raised on Nyx. He supposed that technically he was a Nyxian too, given that, as of just over 5 years ago, he had relocated to Nyx with his wife to start their family. They maintained a legal residence at Aranis's ducal estate on that bucolic and pastoral world. A world that would freeze, burn, starve, or devour anyone on the station not presently in the room, if it didn't crush them first. Nyx very much reminded him of a technology-infused medieval version of his family's home in the Appalachians, though with the benefit of fewer tourists and better Wi-Fi. Like an increasing number of individuals across the Confederation, he was of one race, but living on another race's world. He was Nyxian, but a human. Not that many cared to register the distinction as particularly relevant. Indeed, they were more than likely to be offended if he brought it up at all. Once mentioning to his wife that, to her, the other 3 races were technically aliens, had earned him a quizzical rebuke. "Well, my son is not an alien, but if you feel that way, you, however, can go live in the barn with the rest of the livestock, until you feel like being my Dirantoro gentleman again." Such a level of integration, particularly between humans and Aranis's people, was still a relatively new concept for all the races, although they had taken to it virtually overnight. In the reality of an us-against-the-galaxy struggle, where an amoral enemy wouldn't hesitate to glass one's entire world's ecosystem into extinction, one tended to make very, very close friends with your enemy's enemies. There had been some uncovered idiosyncrasies along the way, of course. His wife's race, for example, had no word for themselves in her native language. Beyond the night beasts that the galactic community called them, there wasn't any name for her people in any other language, Nyxian or otherwise. They only had words for men and women, and a version of woman that applied to both genders of any sapient people, and a word like the English mankind that similarly failed to convey the point accurately. When the need had become apparent after first contact, the natively evolved Nixians debated fiercely, but eventually settled on a series of simple compound words. They selected Dairotisa, meaning night people or people of the night, for themselves, Dairantoro, or day people for humans, and Stirakasa for the Aelith, which roughly translated to star people. The Inukdraisorkmara were what they called the Confederation's Shalkoth, which had no direct translation, but could be best paraphrased as redeemed people who are like useful beasts of burden. They had already been using the Rikarivaz to cover every single other sapient species in the galaxy, which meant thinking prey, though Stephen had heard many Nixians refer to them colloquially by the human loanword, long pigs. Their choice of terminology presented a very useful study on how language affected one's thinkings. To them, sapients were divided into people and not people, nothing more. The Dryantisa simply didn't have a concept for extraterrestrials like humans did. It may have been a consequence of their interactions with aliens long before their realization that stars were merely other suns, and that other planets could exist and even harbor life. To them, the aliens were nothing more than orcs, goblins, demons, or dragons. Humans were just the friendly elves from one village over, who would stop by to trade goods, or would even move in next door to live, work, marry, or set up the occasional shop or inn. In addition, due to their lack of modern context, their understanding of everyone's place in the galaxy was at least due in part to the largely successful efforts of fitting their new interstellar reality into their traditional and cultural dogma. Their varied and not insignificant educational systems tended to have a healthy mix of religion and tradition as the underpinnings of their research and doctrine, and it showed. Almost the entire sum of the higher learning on Nyx resided in its religious orders, convents, seminaries, and the military academies. Half their population attended one of these, and sometimes two or more. Aranis herself had attended both a convent and a prestigious military university. The aliens, as her people understood them, were well documented, and had been firmly entrenched in their religion as scions of evil. The other three races, particularly the humans, had been similarly incorporated, though to the opposite effect. By standing so readily against the forces of depravity, surely their arrival could only have been of divine providence. Stephen recalled the words of his wife's former Mother Superior. "We must permit this. Did not the Dryantoro aid the ecclesiastical champion, Sister Aranis, in her harrowing of hell?" After what seemed like a far longer time than was polite, the large door opened to a busy and noisome hallway, admitting an equally large and noisome creature that the couple recognized. He was the same polite but indifferent sergeant in the customs police that had earlier escorted them to the room after their visas couldn't be processed. He dragged a folding chair behind him, scraping and banging along the deck. It seemed wide enough to fit his frame comfortably, but only just. Unlike when he had brought them here, the giant being now wore thick, padded armor from head to hoof, and a sturdy-looking helm with a clear plastic visor. Behind the sergeant, 4 more equally massive creatures of various species shuffled in, each wearing a similar set of armor suitable to their biologies. Nevertheless, nervously, they directed their attention between their superior and the couple. Though their true name had recently been provided to the Confederation, the sergeant's species had been known colloquially for the last decade as Taurens because of their appearance. The slave ship captain that Stephen and Aranis had been acquainted with was one such example. Even now, just seeing the man filled Stephen with a low anger. He couldn't begin to imagine what Aranis was feeling.
Countless abductions. We are only now learning the full extent of it, darling. What they did to us for years. As a people, it's like being eaten by cattle,
he could remember her saying. Good morning, then, the sergeant said, unfolding his chair and collecting the visa packets Stephen offered. He took his seat, leaning over the sheets, flipping through them one by one and mumbling the equivalents of and to himself every few seconds. Based on what Stephen knew, the sergeant seemed short for his species, standing about a hair under 2¼ meters. Even though in armor, he appeared harried and a little worn down, but well kept nonetheless, like a civil servant who earned a moderate income, but lacked any free time to use it. I heard your ship was transmitting something about this, and now I see you wrote it here, the sergeant said. So, your people are called the Susent?
So-sent, Aranis clarified, speaking softly and deliberately. Pronounced so-sent.
The large creature huffed. He didn't seem impressed. Right. Just going off your own translation program's supplied phonetics. So we've run into an issue with getting your entrance visas in order.
Oh? What's that? She asked.
Well, ma'am. You're, ma'am?
Yes, I am female, she replied, placing a gloved hand on her chest, then moving it to Stephen's chest. And my husband is male.
Well, ma'am, we can't process your visa until we get some answers, he said. So, we scan everyone who enters this port for weapons, diseases, and other dangerous stuff. That was the arch you passed through in the customs line just before we brought you here. Now, you people are new here, so maybe it's nothing, but according to our AI, your biology is really similar to a dangerous kind of alien predator. Stephen and Aranis waited in the hopes that more information would be forthcoming. But no, the man had finished, as if his statement had explained the situation in its entirety. It had, of course, but neither of the diplomats would let him know that.
I find that offensive in the extreme, said Aranis, slipping into bad cop. Your AI is insane. How could it mistake a sapient being for a wild animal? How in the world are we even close to—
Not him, the sergeant interrupted. Just you, lady. And that confirmed the pair's suspicions.
That's my lady to you, huffed Aranis,
succeeding at sounding exactly like the indignant noble she had never wanted to become.
I simply do not understand, and I'm getting impatient. My little service dog Lucy is in my cabin back on the ship right now, and I just know she's getting lonely without me. The longer I'm here, the more chance I have of coming back to a messy accident on the deck. Would you want that? What do you need from us so we can get this moving along? You have to know we have a very important diplomatic meeting to attend.
Yes, milady, the sergeant said, his gaze momentarily shifting to one of his fellow officers, then back to the purple-clad woman. We know that. The station's commandant is speaking with the GC Planetary Liaison's office right now. We thought it would help things along if I got some information from you.
I'm sorry, sir, but could your scanners have been fooled by our dog? Stephen asked hopefully.
Dog? Is that like a slave? The sergeant asked.
Stephen shrugged. Maybe. Semi-sapiens assistant?
That she owns? He asked. Stephen nodded.
Well, yes, sir.
It's a slave, said the sergeant. I'll get the form you need to bring it on the station.
That's wonderful and all, but that won't be necessary, sir. We can just answer whatever questions you have as quickly as possible, Stephen replied, scratching at the 5 o'clock shadow on his face. We only mentioned the dog, though, because, well, I mean, it's small, it's no night beast, but could that maybe have fooled the AI? If genetic material from its fur or dander were picked up on your scanners by accident. The sergeant looked first to one of his officers, and then another. They both had equally blank expressions.
I don't know. Maybe, he answered. Not my area. But it seems more reasonable than thinking your wife is a night beast.
Well, I don't know. You don't know her like I do. Know what I mean, buddy?
Stephen forced a deep chuckle and winked at the man.
Shellcoth in the streets, night beast in the sheets, am I right? Sometimes I feel like a night beast, Aranis said warily, when my husband doesn't behave himself. Stephen may have overstepped a line in this act.
The sergeant looked defiantly unimpressed with the man's comment. If he were a human, Stephen imagined he would have rolled his eyes. He turned his attention to a small beeping tablet pulled from a pouch on his belt. Nope, not what happened, the alien said, shaking his head. According to the AI, anyway. It says that based on a bunch of scans, bone and muscle structure, crap like that, she definitely matches a night beast. Can't be from your dog slave, 'cause no genetic testing was done except for infectious agents. You've both been briefed about the protocols for that, I hope, and... He looked straight at Stephen. The human smiled pleasantly, raising both eyebrows in anticipation. Go on, he said. And it says that you qualify as a Deathworld-like being, possibly even more dangerous than your night beast lady friend.
Wife, said Aranis. I am his wife.
Uh-huh. The sergeant looked back at the tablet, then back to Stephen, appraising the much smaller man with a critical eye. The alien shook his head, blanked the device's screen, and chuckled. This isn't close to making any kind of sense. The AI must be busted.
I'm a little surprised your people even use them, Stephen said.
Why's that surprising? The sergeant asked.
The potential for going rogue, Aranis supplied, but I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. The GC must have implemented some very effective safeties while constructing it.
Oh, the GC didn't build it, the sergeant said. We've just been copying it over and over since we got it. He pushed his chair back, the metal legs scraping against the floor. He placed the tablet back into his uniform pouch and turned to the door. We're done here. You can pick up your visas at the immigration desk. Without another glance, the 5 aliens exited the room, leaving the large door wide open.
Well, I guess that settles that, my gentleman, Aranis said, standing to the side. She offered a hand to Stephen. He had asked her many times since they had met to stop treating him like some delicate flower or rescued damsel. Her response had always been the same, that she wasn't going to discard a lifetime of chivalry and etiquette just to spare him his own wife's attention. Eventually he had mostly just given up and accepted it. He refused her hand and rose from his seat, but acknowledged the gesture with a nod of thanks. As a small defiance, he pushed both her and his chairs in before she had a chance to do it for him, favoring her with a smirk of satisfaction. After she had made sure the aliens were gone and wouldn't turn to look, Aranis landed a stout cup-handed smack on his backside. Stephen grunted in surprise, while his wife casually walked away, humming to herself like nothing had happened. It was fortunate that the doorway was so wide. The two might have come to blows over who would have the honor of going through first otherwise. Alright, y'alls, I hope you enjoyed that one. So I purchased a really shit computer and have it set up in my closet, trying to do the recording stuff in here now, but
it is goddamn dusty, and it is goddamn toasty. So, we'll see how long this lasts. It wasn't that bad last time I tried to record in here, so maybe I diddly done fucked up somewhere along the way. Anyways, if you like this one, go ahead and subscribe, leave me a like, and let me know if there were any issues with it. I know that someone mentioned the sound being a little bit too low, and hopefully it is not this time. Let me know if I fucked it up again. Have a nice one, y'alls.